October 2002. The streets of Washington, D.C. were gripped by fear. In just over 3 weeks, ordinary moments, pumping gas, shopping for groceries, walking into school, became life-or-death risks. 11 people lay dead, and the killers? Ghosts in the crowd. The nation was desperate for answers, and terrified that no one was safe. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Let's dive right into it. It began without warning. October 2nd, 2002, Montgomery County, Maryland. At 5:20 p.m., a bullet shattered the calm of a supermarket parking lot, killing 55-year-old James Martin. No witnesses, no suspect, no motive. Police treated it as a single tragic murder. But by sunrise the next day, the body count would start climbing fast. October 3rd was a massacre. In just 16 hours, 5 people were shot dead in 5 separate locations. A landscaper mowing grass, a woman vacuuming her minivan at a gas station, a man walking down the street, a part-time taxi driver waiting for passengers. All killed by a single, precise rifle shot, and always from a distance. Police realized instantly they had a spree killer on their hands. These weren't random shootings anymore. They were methodical, calculated, and terrifyingly accurate. Witnesses spoke of hearing a pop, like a firecracker, before seeing someone collapse. Others heard nothing at all. There were no suspects, no getaway cars, just death, sudden and clean. Authorities believed they were dealing with a trained marksman. The shooter was hitting victims from distances of up to 150 yards, often with a single fatal shot to the head or chest. People in D.C. started living differently. Gas stations draped tarps over awnings to block sightlines. Drivers zigzagged while filling their tanks, hoping to make themselves harder targets. Parents kept children home from school. Some refused to leave their houses altogether. The killer could be anywhere, and he seemed to see everyone. The FBI and local police launched the largest manhunt the region had ever seen. Roadblocks, helicopters, and hundreds of officers combed through leads. Tips poured in, over 1,400 in a single day. But the killer was always one step ahead. Then came the first clue, a tarot card. Found near one of the shooting scenes, it had 3 chilling words scrawled across it. "Call me God." Was it taunting? A signature? Or a game? Whatever it was, it meant the shooter wanted control and attention. Over the next week, the shootings continued. A 13-year-old boy was gunned down outside his school in Bowie, Maryland. A woman loading shopping bags into her car was shot at close range. A bus driver, going about his morning route, became another victim. The shooters had no consistent victim profile. They killed men, women, and children. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, anyone could be next. Police began to suspect there wasn't just one shooter. Eyewitnesses reported different descriptions. A white van, a dark Chevy Caprice, 2 men, sometimes just one. But still, nothing solid enough to catch them. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. The killers were John Allen Muhammad, 41, and Lee Boyd Malvo, 17. Muhammad, a Gulf War veteran with expert marksmanship skills, had befriended Malvo in Antigua years earlier. The teen saw him as a father figure. But Muhammad's intentions were far darker. They converted a 1990 blue Chevy Caprice into a mobile sniper's nest. A hole drilled near the license plate allowed them to fire without ever leaving the car. From the outside, it looked like any ordinary sedan. From the inside, it was a machine built for hunting humans. Their motive? Money and chaos. Muhammad planned to extort $10 million from the government in exchange for stopping the killings. But there were also personal motives. Muhammad had lost custody of his children in a bitter divorce, and prosecutors would later say part of his plan was to kill his ex-wife and make it look like she was just another random victim. Negotiations with ghosts. The shooters began leaving clues, even contacting police. In one chilling phone call, Malvo tried to guide investigators to a previous shooting they had committed in Alabama, hoping to prove they were serious. They also left cryptic notes at crime scenes. One read, "Your children are not safe. Anywhere. At any time." The threat worked. Schools stayed in lockdown. Outdoor sports were canceled. The D.C. metro area had become a prison without walls. October 22, 2002. Conrad Johnson, a bus driver, was killed just before 6 a.m. as he stood on the steps of his bus. The murder sent shockwaves through the community. But this time, police had a break. For days, tips had been narrowing in on a blue Chevy Caprice with New Jersey plates. Investigators linked it to Muhammad and Malvo after discovering Muhammad's fingerprint on a magazine dropped at an earlier shooting scene. On October 24th, at 3:15 a.m., police surrounded a rest stop near Myersville, Maryland. Inside the Caprice, Muhammad and Malvo were asleep, the rifle still inside. There was no shootout, no last stand. Just two men pulled from a car that had been the epicenter of a nation's nightmare. The trials were as chilling as the crimes. Prosecutors revealed that Muhammad and Malvo had been linked to at least 27 shootings across multiple states. Their spree had actually begun months before D.C., with murders in Louisiana, Alabama, and Washington state. In 2004, Muhammad was sentenced to death. Malvo, who was a minor at the time of the killings, was sentenced to life in prison without parole, though later court rulings have opened the possibility of resentencing. On November 10, 2009, John Allen Muhammad was executed by lethal injection. He showed no remorse. The 23 days of terror left the D.C. area scarred. Survivors spoke of living with paranoia for years. Parents remembered clutching their children tightly in public. Ordinary errands still carried echoes of fear. The case also changed law enforcement. The sniper investigation led to improved interagency communication, better use of criminal databases, and new methods for tracking mobile killers. But the psychological impact remains. For 23 days in October 2002, life in America's capital felt like living in the crosshairs of an invisible enemy. 2 men, 1 car, 23 days, 13 dead, dozens wounded, and millions haunted. The DC snipers didn't just take lives. They took away the sense of safety in the most ordinary moments. And perhaps the most chilling part of all is knowing that it only took 2 people to hold an entire region hostage. When police pulled John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo from that blue Chevy Caprice in the early morning darkness of October 24, 2002, the nightmare seemed over. The rifle was still in the trunk. The killers were in custody. The D.C. area could finally breathe again. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered that the 23 days of terror were only the tip of the iceberg, and the full truth about the snipers' motives and movements was far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. In the hours after the arrest, police combed through the Chevy Caprice. The modifications were chilling. A hole drilled through the trunk allowed the shooter to fire without being seen. The rear seat had been removed, giving access to the trunk from inside the car. The back windows were covered, shielding the gunman from outside view. Inside, they found a Bushmaster .223 caliber rifle, a tripod, a scope, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. But what truly shocked detectives were the other items. Stolen credit cards, fake IDs, detailed maps with shooting locations marked, and a notebook filled with strange writings. This wasn't random chaos. It was an organized, mobile killing operation. Muhammad's life before the killings was a chain of troubling events. Born John Allen Williams, he served in the U.S. Army, trained as a marksman, and fought in the Gulf War. But after leaving the military, his life unraveled. A bitter divorce, a custody battle for his children, and an increasing obsession with control. In 2001, he met 15-year-old Lee Boyd Malvo in Antigua. The teenager was bright, but lost. Muhammad became his mentor, protector, and, eventually, his manipulator. Prosecutors would later paint a disturbing picture. Muhammad saw Malvo not just as an accomplice, but as a surrogate son. Together, they would travel across the country, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. The investigation revealed that the D.C. shootings were part of a much larger pattern. Months earlier, Muhammad and Malvo had allegedly committed murders in Washington state, Arizona, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. One of the earliest linked victims was Kenya Cook, a 21-year-old woman shot in Tacoma, Washington, in February 2002. Witnesses recalled seeing a blue Chevy Caprice in the area, the same car that would later haunt the streets of D.C. In August 2002, Liquor store owner Mohammed Rashid was shot and wounded in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Ballistics would later match the bullet to the same Bushmaster rifle used in the sniper spree. The randomness of their victims wasn't an accident. It was part of the plan, to make the murders seem impossible to predict, impossible to solve. Detectives pieced together the killer's plan from notes, conversations, and Malvo's eventual confessions. Mohammed's scheme went beyond murder. He wanted to create fear so intense that people would pay him to stop. The ransom demand? $10 million. In one chilling twist, investigators found that Mohammed had circled the neighborhood of his ex-wife in his maps. Prosecutors believe that after securing the ransom, Mohammed planned to kill her and gain custody of his children, hiding her death among the random victims. Malvo later claimed that Mohammed told him they would use the ransom to create a utopian community for homeless black children. Whether that was ever genuine or just another manipulation is something only Mohammed truly knew. As the killings continued in October 2002, the snipers began leaving notes at crime scenes. One read, "We have your children. This is about more than you can imagine." Another demanded that $10 million be delivered to a bank account. But the notes weren't just threats, they contained instructions. The killers wanted law enforcement to call a specific phone number. That number, investigators discovered, was traced to a payphone at a seafood restaurant in Montgomery, Alabama. And here's where things got interesting. Police in Alabama realized the number matched a case from a month earlier, where two women were shot outside a liquor store. One died. A fingerprint left at the scene matched. Lee Boyd Malvo. Suddenly, the DC sniper case was no longer just about the Washington area murders. It was linked to a cross-country killing spree. By October 23, 2002, police were closing in. Tips about a blue Chevy Caprice with New Jersey plates kept surfacing. Surveillance teams began searching highways, rest stops, and parking lots. Then, at 3:15 a.m. on October 24th, a truck driver spotted the Caprice at a rest stop in Myersville, Maryland. The trucker recognized it from news reports and called 911. Police moved in silently. Inside the car, Mohammed and Malvo were asleep. The rifle lay ready in the trunk. They were taken into custody without a struggle. For many, it was the first deep breath they had taken in weeks. But relief quickly gave way to another question: why? In 2003, Mohammed was tried in Virginia for the murder of Dean Myers, one of the sniper victims. Prosecutors presented their case like a puzzle, each piece linking Mohammed to Malvo, the rifle, the car, and the shootings. Ballistics were damning. Every bullet from the DC killings matched the Bushmaster rifle. Witnesses placed the Caprice near multiple crime scenes. Malvo's fingerprints were found on items inside the car. Malvo, still a teenager, was also tried for murder. His defense argued he had been brainwashed by Mohammed. While that claim didn't spare him from conviction, it did become a factor in later debates about sentencing juveniles to life without parole. Mohammed was sentenced to death in Virginia. Malvo received multiple life sentences. The trial coverage was relentless. People wanted answers not just about the logistics of the killings but about the psychology. How had a 41-year-old man convinced a 17-year-old to kill strangers in cold blood? How had they evaded one of the largest manhunts in American history for 3 weeks? Experts pointed to Mohammed's military training, the mobile sniper's nest, and the choice of random targets as the keys to their success. But there was also something more chilling: the killer's calm during the spree. Survivors recalled seeing the shooter's eyes through the rifle scope. Cold, focused, unhurried. Just when investigators thought they had the full picture, more cases started surfacing. Shootings from months earlier, in states the killers had traveled through. Detectives began retracing the pair's movements across the U.S., piecing together unsolved murders and robberies. In some cases, local police departments had no idea their isolated incidents were connected to the DC snipers. One of the most haunting connections came from Tacoma, Washington, where a murder from February 2002 matched the Bushmaster rifle. But there was something else found in that case. Something that would lead authorities to a third person who may have known far more than they had admitted. And that discovery would change everything investigators thought they knew about the DC sniper case. For 23 days, the DC snipers terrorized a nation. But the real story, the one involving their earlier killings, a mysterious third figure, and a trail of evidence stretching across the country, was only just beginning to unravel. John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo may have been the ones pulling the trigger during those 23 days of terror in 2002. But as investigators dug into their earlier crimes, an unsettling possibility emerged. A third figure, someone in the shadows, who might have known far more about the killings than the public ever realized. And if this person was involved, even indirectly, what else did law enforcement miss? After Muhammad and Malvo's arrest, police revisited the murder of Kenya Cook in Tacoma, Washington. She had been shot through the doorway of her aunt's home in February 2002. The case had gone cold for months. When the Bushmaster rifle was recovered from the blue Chevy Caprice, ballistics confirmed it was the same weapon used to kill Kenya. But there was more. A neighbor told detectives she had seen a third person with Muhammad and Malvo around that time. It was vague, just a figure who occasionally visited, sometimes driving with them. The witness couldn't identify them, but it planted a seed of doubt. As investigators retraced the pair's movements across the U.S., they found traces of a possible accomplice. This individual wasn't necessarily pulling the trigger, but may have provided shelter, transportation, or information. In Alabama, during the liquor store shooting linked to Malvo's fingerprint, a store clerk recalled seeing 3 people in a car. In Arizona, a hotel manager remembered Muhammad checking in, but also remembered another young man who wasn't Malvo. It's worth noting, these sightings were never confirmed, and law enforcement publicly downplayed the idea of a third sniper. But internally, FBI case files show they investigated the possibility well into 2003. The DC killings were just the final act in a bloody cross-country spree. As the FBI worked backward, they identified several shootings likely committed by Muhammad and Malvo before the media ever heard the word sniper. February 2002, Tacoma, Washington. Kenya Cook, killed at her aunt's home. March 2002, Tucson, Arizona. 60-year-old Jerry Taylor shot on a golf course. May 2002, Denton, Texas. 2 men shot in separate incidents while walking home. 1 survived. August 2002, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Liquor store shooting leaves 1 dead, 1 wounded. In each of these cases, witnesses gave different descriptions of the suspects. Sometimes it was 2 people, sometimes 3. For detectives, that inconsistency was maddening. Was it simply the chaos of memory, or was someone else slipping in and out of the picture? While awaiting trial, Lee Boyd Malvo began to talk. First to police, then to journalists. He described Muhammad as a father figure who taught him how to shoot, how to move without being seen, and, most chillingly, how to view people as targets instead of human beings. But when asked about the third person, Malvo's answers were evasive. In some interviews, he denied anyone else was involved. In others, he hinted that people along the way had helped them, knowingly or unknowingly. One statement stood out: "We weren't always just 2. Whether that meant temporary helpers, criminal associates, or something more sinister was never clarified. The possibility of a third figure raised troubling questions. If someone else was aiding Muhammad and Malvo, even on the margins, could they have stopped the spree before it reached DC? Could earlier tips, if taken more seriously, have prevented the 23-day reign of terror? FBI officials would later admit that the sniper case exposed flaws in how different jurisdictions shared information. At the time, the dots connecting the Alabama shooting, the Tacoma murder, and the Arizona golf course killing were scattered across the country. Without a centralized system, they weren't linked until after the DC arrests. Even now, some of the shootings tied to Muhammad and Malvo remain technically unsolved. No charges were ever filed in certain cases outside DC, despite strong circumstantial evidence. Part of the reason: prosecutors already had enough to put both men away for life, and in Muhammad's case, to secure the death penalty. Chasing additional cases across multiple states would have been costly and, in their view, unnecessary. But for the families of those earlier victims, unnecessary is not the same as closure. On November 10, 2009, John Allen Muhammad was executed by lethal injection in Virginia. He offered no final words, showed no remorse, and never explained the full extent of his crimes. Some hoped his death would close the book on the sniper case. Instead, it left a void, a silence that only deepened the unanswered questions. Malvo remains in prison. He was originally sentenced to life without parole, but Supreme Court rulings on juvenile sentencing have opened the door for resentencing in some of his cases. In recent years, Malvo has expressed remorse, describing himself as a manipulated teenager who was brainwashed into murder. He's participated in interviews and therapy trying to understand and explain his own transformation from a 15-year-old boy to a teenage killer. But when pressed about possible others involved, he remains careful. Some believe it's loyalty, others believe it's fear. 20-plus years later, the DC sniper case is still studied by criminologists, law enforcement, and psychologists, not just for how it unfolded, but for what it revealed about fear, manipulation, and the cracks in America's investigative system. Yet one question lingers. Was it truly just Muhammad and Malvo? The official record says yes. The eyewitness contradictions say maybe not. And somewhere, buried in the case files of multiple states, are statements and tips that have never been publicly released. For 23 days in October 2002, the DC snipers held a nation hostage. They taught millions that danger could come from anywhere, at any time, without warning. But the deeper dive, the forgotten victims, the cross-country trail, and the whispers of a third shadow suggests the story we know may not be the whole story. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: if there was someone else out there, they've never been caught. Tell me what you think in the comment section below.